Guess we're gonna call the meeting to order here.
What? Yeah, it was when I came in.
Thank you. We will be calling the, welcome everyone. We're calling to order the Board of Selectmen special meeting for Wednesday, February 28th. We have a single topic, if you will, on our agenda today. And just to be, I wanted to make sure I explained to everyone, our agenda really today is to discuss and evaluate the RFP proposals that were submitted back in 2023 for a consultant to develop a master plan for the country club. In my view, the master plan includes what we would do with the country club as relates to the entire club, not necessarily just a particular section or anything along those lines. And I believe that the respondents took that into consideration to some degree. So today we're here specifically to determine, one, first of all, since this is a new board, we were not the ones who issued the RFP. The new board was left to determine what we wanted to do about the RFP. So the first real question is, and we'll answer in a sense it may have been already, is whether or not we want to proceed with the consultant, period. And then what I'd like to see us do is determine which consultants we want to take the next step with, because at this point in time, those proposals are older. We'll need to update them from a financial standpoint, and we'll also like to input to very selected respondents exactly what we might be looking for, which might impact those particular financials. So there are 6 respondents that we had. Just a couple of things we're going to start off with today is we're going to start with public comment. We felt it was very important to allow the public to at least comment on this, but I did want you to know that although your comments might be related to what you might like to see at the country club or other things related to the country club, our intent today is really to discuss the RFP responses and how we will proceed with the RFP responses specifically. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that we normally live stream our meetings, the Board of Selectmen meetings. We live stream them. Today we'll only go until about 6:30 with live stream because there's another committee. There's another event over at the library that had advertised live streaming for today at 7 o'clock. And they not only had indicated they would do it, but obviously they're prepared to do it. So we'll only be live streamed. We'll continue to record. So there will be a recording of the session. For those who are watching on live stream, I just wanted you to know that at 6:30 we'd probably stop the live streaming, and so that they can do it. Our technology and our resources are such that we can only do one at a time. As far as public comment is concerned, we're going to limit it to the first hour of our meeting. And because of that, and thank you very much for the participation we have tonight, we'd like to limit folks to 3 minutes. And if we start to seem to be getting into a time where not everyone will get to speak, I ask you to please consider, if you've heard your point made, you could just come up and say you'd like to reiterate, but you don't necessarily have to say everything, but just let us know that where your particular comments align, and it'll save us some time along from that perspective. So without further ado, and by the way, that 7 o'clock event, in case anybody should want to go there, is a community conversation on disabilities over at the library at 7 o'clock. But at this point in time, what I'd like to do is entertain public comment. So if you could come up, state your name, state your address, and make your comment, and please try to limit it to about 3 minutes.
My name is Brian Pines, 50 Hickory Road, Woodbridge. I'm the president of the Woodbridge Land Trust, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. We have a proposal that is one of the considerations that you have for an easement on that property. And I just wanted to point out that, and we're interested in also being a part of this program with you. So the property is unique. It's a resilient microhabitat, and so each patch of woodland or open space, in this case, is an integral whole and is a part of a higher level component. So landscapes are a special kind of vertical structure that's a hierarchy. So when you consider a small piece of property like this, or 150 acres, you also have to consider the connectivity with other parcels in other parts of the state. So that's an area that's really very, very vital. These patches are connected at the higher levels of regionally, statewide, nationally, and globally. So Connecticut is a home to a multitude of migratory birds from Central America. They come here to nest, to feed their hatchlings on caterpillars. There are over 600 varieties just on our oak trees. I thought that was mine. So, you know, this area is vital not only to us, but also to the habitat that's around. We're concerned, all of us, about climate change, decreasing greenhouse gases, emissions, relative sea level rise globally, but we must act on these things locally. So these are important, but this is all part of a very delicate equilibrium. And when we upset the equilibrium, it's not sustainable. So I read the Mika, your note saying that you don't want it to be a burden on the community. We don't see this property as a burden. We see it as a jewel. And the National Park Service, when it was first started, the idea was that it would be self-sustaining by generating revenue through commodities such as timber harvest. And they realized actually that the value of the property is what was appreciated by the people. The value is in the property itself and what we gain through it. And we certainly found that during the pandemic, where people came and they hiked the trails, they came to the country club property, and it was just, it's hard to put a value on the health. Okay.
That was the time.
The tone
Oh.
you hear there is about the 3-minute timer, so if you could wrap it up, Brian,
So
thank you.
basically, I think that when you do the charrette or the survey, you can actually have included questions that will generate those answers, because we do know that people who live closer to the area are going to put a higher value on it. But that value is something that I think all of us appreciate, even if you don't hike West Rock or you don't go to Sleeping Giant. You value the fact that it's part of our history.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very
so
much.
thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Allison, are we going in any order, or is it?
Yeah, we have Catherine Blackwell next, followed by Ryan Mills.
Good evening, Mika and the Board of Selectmen.
Or Dick?
My name's Dick Blackwell. I reside at 15 Park Lane. I'm about a half a block from the Woodbridge Country Club. We used to be the WCC. And I love hiking over there and taking my dog. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to discuss this, the WCC and so early in your tenure. But I see you're considering hiring a consultant to take next steps with respect to the country club property. While I personally have doubts about the need for such a consultant, particularly since we spent 15 years mulling it over, since '09 purchase. If that's the route you take, I urge you to avoid having this step cause a delay in properly creating and moving ahead with a plan. As we all know, the town election this past November was in part a referendum on the two candidates' conflicting positions on developing the property. Mika was clear about his intention to include housing as well as other uses. I believe his sound victory demonstrated that most residents agree with him. There could be, I don't think, any doubt that we lack affordable housing, and the property with its proximity to public sewer and water and public transportation is helpful. In addition, the 155 acres offers ample opportunity for other important goals such as renewable energy, recreation, and conservation. Mickey also notices focus on controlling taxes, and that will require revenue growth, and I do believe that it offers an opportunity at the CCW for some growth in revenue. What I did is, because I have a lot of neighbors that are really interested in this subject, and I talked to 20 homeowners on Park Lane and other locations that are near the country club. Anyway, we all seem to agree, believe it or not, on 4 goals for the property. And kind of my recommendation to the board is that we look at goals for the property based on experience with the property, and then flesh out how do we implement the goals. But the goals that the group of 20 came to, number 1 is conservation. I think Woodbridge, one of the reasons I love the bounty of open space and to capitalize on the country club property, I think we all should talk to conservationists to develop the best way to capitalize on the open space to optimize enjoyment. At a minimum, trails should be cleared with native plantings and signage to identify the plantings and the unique heritage of the farmland, which was once owned by Roger Sherman, which is mind-boggling to me. I mean, I've had a dream about him getting on his buggy and going down to New Haven when he was mayor. But anyway, the second is recreation goals. Woodbridge residents deserve to have access to at least the recreational benefits that WCC once offered. This should include a well-maintained clubhouse, swimming pool, tennis, racquetball, and pickleball, ideally some enclosed for year-round use and meeting space. Third in order is renewable energy. Connecticut has an executive mandate for 100% of the state's electricity to be generated by renewable sources by 2040. And Tony helped with this, but only 12 acres, roughly, of WCC land could be used for solar that would generate 100% of the town's current electrical usage. This would not only make a major stride in renewable energy, but also save us several $100,000 in electric.
Dick, we're gonna
That was time when the.
I'm almost finished, just give me a minute.
go quickly. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, the last is property tax mediation, and part of that is affordable housing, and we all believe that it could be structured to avoid a school population strain and also a strain on municipal resources. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Folks, can I just get a quick show of hands? I just want to do some quick math. How many people intend to speak, would like to speak? So there's 2, 4, 6, 8,
15
10.
on this list, 15 people signed up, and
okay.
there's about 3 or
So we are going to have to kind of keep it, right?
Yeah,
We are going to have to limit it to 3 minutes at the most, folks. I'm really sorry. Please.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll keep time with the ding over here, that way if you can
Alright.
pay attention, yes, and I'll.
Where do we sign up?
Allison, can you tell us who's coming up next?
Yeah,
Being moved?
yes, I have Ryan Mills, then David Jensen, and then Muffy German after that.
Let's move forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Selectmen. Ryan Mills, 1189 Johnson Road. Thanks for having us this evening. I'd like you to imagine, if you will, in your mind's eye, an image. The snow-covered hills of the former WCC lined with children and parents sledding and cross-country skiing and shrieking together with joy. Cars packed along Johnson and Fairview with families meeting, connecting in a kind of impromptu community reunion taking place. And as if that is not enough, add in a bald eagle soaring overhead, surveying this rich ecosystem that serves as the front door from New Haven to our community. It sounds like a Norman Rockwell painting, but I witnessed it this past month on a school snow day. This natural park that connects our community, even as it has unfortunately been a cause of so much division amongst us. Every day, all year long, the WCC property offers us the ability to draw together as a Woodbridge community. It offers us a natural gathering place that is home to so many critical species, including ourselves, who need places like this to connect across these divisions and to remember our ultimate unity with the earth and with each other. Yes, we need to hold down taxes. Thank you. Yes, we need affordable housing surrounded by supportive services. Yes, we need to broaden our commercial space, our commercial base. but not at the cost of who we are or at the cost of what this town is. Because when you walk out there, you know that this place is different. So as you ponder these proposals before you, I ask you to think of those families racing each other downhill, to think of the neighbors meeting one another, think of that majestic eagle surveying this little pastoral and beautiful slice of New England that, if it's stewarded like the gift that it is, can bind us together closer as a Woodbridge community and closer to the good earth that we share together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
David Jensen, followed by Muffy, and then Tony Shannon.
Hi, I'm David Jensen. I live at 46 Newton Road. I've been living in town for 20 years, and I've got 2 children who went through middle and high school here. I'd like to emphasize a couple of comments of my predecessors regarding the inherent value of this property and how wonderful it is as a unique element of the total Woodbridge community. I have observed and been interested in the events and the management of the Country Club of Woodbridge from when it was a privately run golf course, its acquisition by the town, and the subsequent 10+ years of paralysis regarding its future. I have reviewed the RFPs that are currently under consideration regarding the future of the Country Club property.
I'm sorry,
Sure.
David, just, I don't mean to interrupt, but did you say reviewed or
I have
reviewed?
reviewed them.
Reviewed, thank you.
I've reviewed them, yes. The refusal part will come momentarily. It strikes me that each of them, except one, is fundamentally based on the premise of selling the property and developing residential use of the property. It also strikes me that the principal driver leading to the town's original acquisition of the property was to keep it out of the hands of residential development. I have observed that each proposal considered to date during our ownership of the property has driven towards residential development, and each has been soundly defeated by our town residents, either through vote or through comment and through essentially inaction by the selectmen in response. I am discouraged by the readiness to once again consider, perhaps through fatigue, proposals leading to residential development. I feel we have an incredibly valuable asset in the Country Club property. Why do we pursue residential development there while we currently have several large parcels of undeveloped residentially zoned property elsewhere in town which have not drawn the attention of investors? Why do we think this use will improve our tax base versus the expenses it will introduce? To date, I've seen no illustration of how residential development of that wonderful property would improve Woodbridge. I believe residential development would adversely affect our town budget, would introduce new and consequential traffic pattern puzzles, and would forego a unique opportunity to conserve and preserve an amazing attribute of our great town. I'd just like to say, let's be very careful in our consideration of treatment of this legacy opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Muffy, Tony, and then Kathy.
I'm Martha German, AKA Muffy, live at 1170 Johnson Road, and I'm here to address 2 topics connected with your upcoming discussion of the future of the former Country Club of Woodbridge, which I will refer to as CCW. First is the Titan Energy Green Skies proposal to put a 14-acre solar farm on CCW. While I don't blame the Titan Energy middleman for choosing the site that is most open, flat, and cost-effective for him, I believe we would be fools to let him make the decision for us. I believe we would be giving up one of the choicest pieces of the property without even contemplating alternative uses. A much better site would be the area suggested by Selectman McCreven along the Parkway, on the far side of Woodfield Road. This choice would allow useless acreage to produce a profit for the town. Another site apparently not considered is the Fitzgerald property, which is open, level, and has the advantage of being in the center of town. And there is one more reason I suggest we hold off on a decision on solar. There is an unexpected competing solar proposal at Homewood Acres Golf Course on Racebrook Road. As of April 25th, golf will stop and the construction of a solar farm on 25 of the 50 acres will take place this year. How will that affect our town? My second topic is the RFP for consultants on the future of CCW. In my view, most are unworthy of this exceptional property. Most offer a piecemeal approach, and many are skewed towards development which residents have repeatedly rejected. One strikes me as unseemly, inappropriate, and possibly illegal because a former head of our housing committee is promoting a proposal for housing on CCW. This RFP was the work of the previous Board of Selectmen. The current board would do well to pause and reevaluate the path forward. While I admire your eagerness to make progress on the CCW issue, ill-advised action is even worse than inaction. What's missing here is a broader point of view. Now let's look at the beautiful wording of your RFP for a town planning consultant who will, quote, demonstrate the ability to form a comprehensive and holistic vision of the future for Woodbridge that considers its assets, challenges, and needs, end of quote. The future of CCW must be viewed in that larger, well-informed context. To begin with, we need a build-out analysis to understand, two more sentences, build-out analysis to understand the impact of our recent zoning changes, allowing for accessory dwelling units and duplexes and some 15 units per acre parcels. Let's explore these changes before blindly rushing to carve up one of our largest assets, the CCW's precious open space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then after
Sorry about that. Excited.
Forget about these chairs.
Wow. Excitement at town hall.
Adrian, meet you.
Well, thank you, Board of Selectmen. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for allowing this. And again, first, I would like to thank all of you at the Board of Selectmen for soliciting and taking action on the proposals for creating a master plan for the former Country Club of Woodbridge. I think this is excellent that you are at least considering this, and I do hope that you will move forward in selecting one of these fine plans. The property has sat dormant for too long and is counter to the original expectation for when we actually purchased the property. I sat on the Board of Finance when we voted to approve the floating of the bond and the purchase of the property with the intent to be able to dictate how the property should be developed and protected. When I personally voted in favor of it back when I was on the Board of Finance, it was my hope that a small part of the property could be sensitively developed to repay the bond and to fund the balance of the property for use of creative open space and conservation. Since the vote in 2009, the floating of the bond, the property has become an eyesore and the cost to the taxpayers has been way too much. It is time to correct the problem, to get back to the original intent of the purpose. So again, I really thank you for considering these RFPs. Again, and with regard to the 6 applicants, I see there were some very strong proposals. Considering the importance of this issue, I'm hoping that the strongest applicant would be considered as opposed to the lowest bidder. This is such an important decision. The depth, local connection, combined with the national experience and the detail of the proposal should be seriously considered. I've actually emailed all this, so if I'm not getting my point across, I appreciate you reading my email. The policy should repay itself with a positive process and the land use resolution that most residents can appreciate if we do this correctly. And I do appreciate it. Thank you for undertaking the master plan for the country club. I look forward to seeing this move forward with the betterment of all Woodbridge residents and taxpayers.
Thank you.
Thank you and good
Thank you
luck.
very
I
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kathy Wick, 181 Rimmon Road. I have a few props here. As I hope you're all aware, I'm sure you are, 2023 was the hottest year on record, and not by a little, by a lot. 2024 is shaping up to be just as bad, if not worse. You probably saw the news stories about it being over 70 degrees in Chicago 2 days ago. Here in Woodbridge, the ground is not frozen, and I see standing water in places I haven't seen it in the 25 years I've lived here. The climate crisis is not an abstract construct. It is here, and it is now. What can we do? It turns out there's something really important we can do. We can preserve as much undeveloped land as humanly possible. Every list from every environmental group and government agency on how to mitigate climate change includes the preservation and expansion of our green spaces. Even if it was expensive to do this, we should do it. But it turns out it's not expensive. It's actually cheaper in the long run to preserve our open land and to prevent development. Open space costs towns less than residential development. If you Google that phrase, you'll find pages and pages of references with scientific studies. I just brought a few. This is from the Office of the State Controller, State of New York, Thomas DiNapoli. It's a 20-page report titled Economic Benefits of Open Space Preservation. He's not a tree hugger, he's a money guy. This report is a summary handout from Heisted Foundation and titled A Fiscal Case for Municipal Investment in Conservation. This chart on the back shows, based on 29 studies in all 5 New England states, the relative cost of residential development, which is all a financial loss to towns, and open space or commercial industrial development, which is profitable for towns. Over and over again, these are the facts. Woodbridge's appeal as a town, the reason people want to come here, other than our schools, is the rural ambiance. I'm sure you saw the New York Times real estate section of April 17th, 2022, a peaceful rural enclave close to New Haven. This article, the author immediately noticed that the rural atmosphere was what brought people here. Quotes in the article, people remarked on their attraction to the town's rural feel. These are people who had recently purchased homes. Its wooded look and the sense of space in the town, indicating the high dollar value of those characteristics. A few pieces of misinformation I think it's important to correct. That the CCW debt is burdensome to the taxpayers. We figured this out with Tony's help. It's about $45 per person per year, and there are only 7 more payments until it's all paid off. So it's not very burdensome. There's also the feeling among some that we already have enough open space. So I just did want to mention the state's green plan, which sets out so many goals that are needed to fulfill. This article, enough open space, not even close. There's still 163,000 acres needed to meet the goal. In summary, I just like to say I think this process will tell us who we are. Are we a town that really cares about sustainability and leaving an inhabitable planet to future generations? Or do we just like to say that's who we are? And when it comes time to act on those stated values, do we actually do something else? We'll find out.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then after Adrian is Al, and then Phyllis.
Hi, everybody.
Boy, Adrian.
I'm Adrian Michi Smith. I was in Mary ICCI Piper Smith. I'm very happy to meet this new board. I live at 17 Ansonia Road in Woodbridge, and I'll try to be brief. I just want to say one thing first. I apologize respectfully to Mr. Schaefer. I don't think it's an eyesore. We walk up there all the time. Okay.
There's parts of it, clubhouse. But anyways,
Well, the
yeah,
clubhouse,
I-
but that's
yes,
just one part.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
The clubhouse is an eyesore. But what I want to talk about is the value of the property as a potential agricultural land. Climate change threatens agriculture in the West, as Kathy just said, and here. Very soon, we in the Northeast may need to produce much more of our own food locally. The State Department of Agriculture has 2 programs to preserve farmland. As of February 2020, the programs have reserved more than 45,300 acres on 373 farms. The long-term goal is to preserve 130,000 acres. The Country Club of Woodbridge is largely comprised of prime farmland soils. The Woodbridge Plan of Conservation and Development specifically states that these soils are an irreplaceable asset and the town should avoid further development on some primeland soils. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Phyllis, and then after Phyllis, Scott. Scott, after Phyllis.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Al Smith. I live at 17 Ansonia Road. As you consider options for the property going forward, I ask you to consider some of the legal ramifications of selling the property for development. The first is protecting the vision. Tonight you're going to be talking about RFPs for a consultant to develop a master plan or a vision for the property, and whether you go forward with this process or not, ultimately I think that's the goal. However, the vision will be irrelevant unless and until the town asserts long-term control over the site through a development agreement, not just a purchase and sale agreement. A development agreement would include specific uses that are required and uses that are prohibited. That is the way to control the property going forward. And further, any of these restrictions in the development agreement should be recorded on the land record so they are binding on future property owners. Otherwise, the new owner and any subsequent owner can do what they want with the property, limited only by the zoning requirements then in place. And as we all know, zoning requirements are subject to change. The second issue has to do with environmental issues. The site has been subject to DEP regulation due to contamination in the past. The sale of the property will inevitably require additional site-wide testing, either by contract or by the operation of law. The DEP, and I'm working with them on this, is currently rewriting its remediation requirements. And while the work isn't done, I am confident, based on my participation, that any discovered contamination in the course of a transaction for selling property will be required immediately to be investigated, and a commitment with a schedule to remediate it will also be required. Finally, any environmental investigations going forward will have to deal with something called PFAS, which is a group of chemicals whose name I can neither pronounce nor remember, but it is the current baddest of the bad actors in the environmental world. To give you a sense, sampling for these compounds are in the parts per trillion. Sampling, let alone remediation, is going to be terribly expensive. So I think the town would be well served to understand these requirements going forward. And finally, I note that in addition to the RFP for the CCW, there's an RFP for a consultant for updating the plan of conservation and development.
Yes.
I just wonder which is the cart and which is the horse. Query whether it makes sense to develop a plan for peace, while there's a plan ongoing for the entire town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, and then after Scott, Richard, right? Is it correct?
Oh.
You're gonna pass, okay, and then after Richard is Diane Urbano.
Hi, Phyllis Janelle, 30 Richard Street Drive. I think I've been doing this too many years. I'll start by saying I certainly agree with Kathy and this nice gentleman who spoke about the hogs and the children's sledding. But while this is all under consideration, I'm wondering why nobody has thought about doing something about the tennis courts at the Country Club of Woodbridge. The sport of pickleball is exploding, and right now the seniors and other people in town are playing in the gym, which has a floor that hasn't been replaced since I think my children were in 3rd grade. Okay, and there are the courts up there that are already starting to have issues. We have this land, we have these courts. I think that someone should be looking into them and look to get them used for summer and spring. I think it would be a great asset for the town, and obviously, all the conservationists who wish to keep this land, you can put me in their pile. I'm done.
Thank you.
Well, I think if you're keeping score, it's probably about 6-1 or 6-2. Good evening, Selectmen. My name is Scott Hunter. I live at 52 Indian Trail. I'm here tonight speaking as a committed member of the community, rooted since about the 1960s. Actually, my son shared the same bus stop with me, not at the same time, but maybe 40 years apart. I'm deeply invested in our future, prosperity, and inclusivity. And I want to really express my appreciation for the open community participation and visioning that has characterized the master planning process for the former country club site. It's heartening, even if at times it might seem divisive, to see our community come together, to come out, to shape the future of our town in collaborative and inclusive manner. The engagement and input from residents, organizations, stakeholders will be invaluable in shaping the future and the vision. The public comments surrounding the master planning options have highlighted somewhat both opposition and support to the potential for regional housing initiatives. This process and the site present a remarkable opportunity for our town's growth and prosperity. The CCW site is strategic. It's not in a public water supply watershed. Only 40% of our town is not in a public water supply watershed. It's also next to a 200-acre nature preserve and bird sanctuary. It's near 3 other 18-hole golf courses. It's less than a half a mile from 2 elementary schools and a congregation, B'nai Jacob. It's 3 miles from the center of New Haven and Yale are economic drivers. It's at the intersection of 2 state highways. There's an underutilized bridge over the Wilbercross Parkway connecting to a primary state highway. It's right nearby. It has existing access to public utilities, such as public sewer, which is only in 1.6% of our residential areas, and it has public water. It's an ideal candidate for responsible development. You always want to include open space and green space. We have a nature preserve right next to it. You want to do that. Birds migrate over the Wilbercross Parkway. They don't walk yet. Thanks for your dedication to serving our town and for your attention to this matter as selectmen. It's important.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Diane, and then Amy, and then Paul.
Diane Urbano, 52 North Bees Road, Woodbridge, Connecticut. It is exactly all of the assets that the person prior to me spoke about that I feel it should be protected and kept as is. It is so accessible and it is so large and it is so almost paid for. And it has a history of being used by people and enjoyed by people, and I think it's a harmful thing to take it away. I also feel, believe me, no one complains about our high taxes, and Mika knows that. And I am always in favor of growth. for the first time, no, that's a horrible thing to say, for the recent decision by the zoning board to open up our regulations to encourage diverse housing is incredibly important. And what it brings with it, more people, more housing, more growth, more people that will need to recreate for quality of life. And I just feel the history of this piece, its central location, all that it offers, it could be just a marvelous, the jewel. And we have a few jewels, but the real jewel of this town. So I really hope you consider your process. And I hope that, it seems to me the process that we're going through has been done before, and it doomed. It didn't work. So I hope you keep an open mind. And thank you for your time, and thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then after Amy, Paul, and then I think this is Jim? Can't read after Paul. There's two more names, Alana and one more.
Thank you.
So, good evening, Amy Morella, 184 Rimmon Road. I'm here to speak specifically to the RFP because I think it's fatally flawed. And I think that you should not proceed with awarding a contract to any of the responders. So the RFP, as we've heard, seeks a consultant to create a comprehensive plan for the CCW. And in doing so, it presupposes that the plan will include a mix of uses before the town has ever analyzed objectively the pros and cons of the various uses suggested by residents. RFP page 1, quote, "The master plan should identify the appropriate location, type, mix, and intensity of land uses, and the plan should balance residents' desires for a long list of different things." Now, this description expressly assumes that the acreage should be cut up into different uses. In an apparent effort to give everyone a little something, Mika shared with me last week the possibility of using 1/3 of the CCW land for development, including housing, 1/3 for recreation, such as pickleball courts, and 1/3 for open space. To be blunt, that compromise would be like Solomon's proposal to split the baby in half. You kill the baby in the process. We don't need a compromise in town. What we need is to reach consensus. To do that, we need to first look at each of these many ideas that residents have put forward for the CCW and analyze each objectively. Instead of this RFP, the town should hire a consultant to analyze each idea, such as housing, solar farm, conference center, open space, in terms of feasibility, short and long-term tax consequences, as well as impacts on our schools and public services, housing stock, and population changes. We need these baseline analyses and a public process to share the results with residents in an open forum with opportunity for questions and discussion before we ever develop a, quote, master plan. And I should add that we need, at the same time, to do the build-out analysis that Muffy German mentioned, as well as an inventory of town properties for solar energy potential. The CCW should not be viewed in isolation. We can expect substantial housing stock changes as a result of the recent zoning changes, and we should see what they are. There may also be other sites on town-owned land for a solar farm, but the open space potential, as you've heard this evening, of the CCW is unique, and it is not replicable anywhere else in town. Once residents have all this information, the objective data regarding alternatives, the build-out analysis, and the inventory of potential solar sites, the town will be able to move past its current division and reach consensus. And then you'd have a consensus-based master plan, not a compromise-based plan. The RFP jumps over all of this, as a result, it will diminish, not increase, the chance that the town will reach consensus. And the RFP further jeopardizes the achievement of consensus by relying on the consultant to do the heavy lifting, rather than accepting that it is up to you, our elected officials, to communicate with and listen to the many residents that you represent. Again, a quote from the RFP. The selected consultant will need to build trust with the public, should have strong public speaking skills, and shall develop a plan to educate and engage stakeholders, including the Board of Selectmen, town staff, neighboring property owners, the public, finally mentioned, other stakeholders, and other town boards, commissions, and committees. I have served on this Board of Selectmen, and believe me, I know it's a tough job, but this job is your job. It's not the job of a hired consultant to do this work. So in sum, it's my urgent plea that this Board of Selectmen look at everything with objectivity and openness, hire a consultant for objective analysis of direct and indirect impacts of all the many ideas put forth by residents, and develop a public process of engagement with residents to share the analysis results and hear what residents have to say in response. They need to discuss the various ideas in the context of a larger town perspective, not just a plan for the CCW in isolation. Believe me, I know it's a big job, but that's what you were elected to do. Speaking for myself, I will discount any proposal resulting from the RFP because its foundation is flawed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Harrigan. I live at 27 Brook Road. I just wanted to make a couple of comments about a misconception about age-restricted housing. Age-restricted housing increases school costs. Over the last 10 or so years, we've had 5 proposals that have included some element of age-restricted housing. All of the developers have said that they expected a third of the residents to come from Woodbridge. That change in sale of homes would accelerate the natural turnover of homes in town and increase the number of children in the school system. And at the approximate cost of Amity of $20,000 a year and a similar cost to Beecher Road, there's no way that residential development, even age-restricted residential development, makes sense for the town. Can anyone cite an example of a town where increased residential development has produced tax relief? I've asked developers who came to Woodbridge this question, and none of them could give an example of where that was the case. Commercial development can create tax benefit. Residential development has never created tax benefit, or tax relief rather, and never will. If selling public land for housing is an economic boon, why isn't every town doing it? In fact, no towns are doing it. No towns are doing it. If they are, they're doing just the opposite, and that's increasing their open space. In this process, I would encourage you not to go down the same path that's gone down 5 times before, that we've had referendums voted against, and 4 other proposals that have been rescinded because of opposition in the town. If you're going to look at options for the property, I strongly suggest you look at open space, which has both benefits financially for the town. It also provides recreation benefit for the town. It's the largest piece of open space in the town, and it's something that should remain open space going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi
Hello.
there, good evening. I'm Alana Rosenberg. I live at 20 Highland Road. And I've spoken both to the zoning committee and the housing committee in past years and more recently about providing affordable housing in our town, the benefits to our school community and our own community in adding diversity, our ethical obligation to fulfill the need for housing in our state, the legal obligation our town has. We provide 1.2% of our necessary 10% of affordable housing. The environmental benefits of denser housing compared to much of how Woodbridge is zoned for large plots of land for single families. the opportunity that the Woodbridge Country Club offers in terms of its location and proximity to New Haven and its amenities like septic. But you all know this, and there's a reason that you appointed the Housing Committee to look at this issue. There's a reason that you adopted the Affordable Housing Plan that they came up with in 2022. There's a reason that you have signed on to the Fair Housing Policy Statement for our town, and I commend all of these actions, and I understand the very important role of hearing the voices of members of our town, and I appreciate you listening to everyone. I caution against the word consensus. That is not the job of the Board of Selectmen in this case, nor any case in government. We are a democracy that is not governed by consensus, and you're our elected officials. I commend you and I trust you to make the right decision on this, and I support the Housing Committee's recommendation that 30 acres of our 155-acre property be used for affordable housing. It would benefit the town immensely. We are in crisis in our state, and we are in crisis in our town with this issue. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
That was everyone who signed up, so I'm not sure if anyone else came.
Is there any additional public comment? Seeing none, I will, oh, I'm sorry, David? Dr. Lober?
Well, we certainly, excuse me, David Lober, 35 Weffewog Road. We've certainly heard a lot of wonderful comments about what should and shouldn't be done with the country club, and I agree with most of them. But I would like to bring us back to 15 years ago, when a man of great vision sat in the seat that you now occupy. And what he said when he was faced with the possible purchase of the country club by a developer, he said this. This was on April 30th in 2009, excuse me, before he was running for re-election. He issued a proposal to purchase a property to keep it as open space, as well as to keep the golf course, the pool, and the tennis facility open. He further stated that if the purchase is approved, the town will acquire 150 acres of beautiful open space to be enjoyed by residents for generations. It would be irresponsible for the board to allow the property to fall into the hands of the developer. That was a compact that he made with the taxpayers of Woodbridge, and they agreed to purchase that property. They overwhelmingly agreed. There were 500 people at that town meeting, and only 45 voted against the proposition of purchasing that property. Since the timely death of First Selectman Sheehy, we have had an interregnum of the two administrations that refused to honor that compact, that promise. And they look for ways to turn that country club into a money-making machine, ill-advisedly. I'm hoping that the person who occupies that chair now has the same vision and foresight that Ed Sheehy had in looking at the proposals for this country club. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Additional comments? What I'd like to mention is that there was a number of correspondence that we also received.
Yes.
I'm not sure exact quantity at this point. Allison?
I think we have 4. We have 4 of them, one of which was also Anthony Staple who spoke today. I will attach them to the minutes for public record.
And we will, obviously, as a board, and I will certainly personally make sure that I review that information, take your comments into consideration, and I certainly appreciate the outpouring of thoughts and opinions today. Thank you very much for that. We will now proceed on with our agenda item, which is to discuss the and evaluate the 6 proposals that we received from as a result of the RFP that we put out. So, thank you everyone for coming today.
Oh, no, I don't know, it was open when I got here.
No, it's okay, you're cold, I can't make you freeze to death because I can't regulate my body temperature. It's okay, fix that one over. Close that one. No, I couldn't do it the other day either. Come on, Farmer Steve.
All right, folks, we'll give the room just some time to clear and quiet. As I said in the beginning, what I hope to do today is for us to consider the first decision that needs to be made is if we feel collectively that this is something that we want to consider. As you know, the responses came in August of last year. The initial intent was for us to respond or to start to evaluate and look for how we were going to act on these in the September timeframe. But it was decided that the new board would decide what we wanted to do. So from that perspective, I suspect, since I haven't heard from anybody in regards to the contrary, I suspect that we're here to evaluate the 6 and see what we want to do from that perspective. So to that end, I don't know if there's any questions or any comments that you want to open up with, but I'd like to just start it off by identifying, of the 6 proposals, how we want to proceed. Please, Maria.
I'd like to first ask a question about the RFP that went out and about whether we have any leeway now that these proposals are already in, to ask the groups if we do decide to narrow down to a smaller list of proposals today, is there an opportunity to have some dialogue with those companies and ask them to possibly amend part of their proposal to include, possibly combining their work with the POCD, to make sure that while we're getting community engagement for all of these ideas, that they are also concurrently running the financial analysis of all of those so that we can have that collective discussion before we move into any type of planning for that and any type of projections. I familiarized myself with the 2014 report, the Marona and McBroom report, and of note, a lot of those numbers and financials are over a decade old.
Right.
And so we certainly need to update those, and I would want that to be part of the conversation before we got into or paid for any type of planning. And I also want to make sure that there is room for some environmental analysis also of any of the proposed ideas in town for what to do with the property, both an immediate impact and what the impact would be on wetlands and on the property and on the surrounding properties going forward. So I'd want to make sure that the financials and the environmental impact of all of those ideas that were garnered in the public sessions were discussed ahead of any planning. And I didn't know if we had the opportunity to, because this board did not write the RFP, to be able to ask them to go back and give us some feedback on how they would approach those two things.
I should have indicated early on that that's exactly what we would do. The process would dictate, and I should start from the beginning, and Tony can concur with this. The normal process in this situation, had this been done in the September timeframe, would likely have been the staff here at Town Hall would have whittled down the respondents. Specifically because I feel I'd like this board to be committed to bringing this to a resolution and to take action on the country club. I felt it important that we start right from the beginning as transparent as possible. So rather than myself and Tony and the staff here identifying who we wanted to go with, I felt it should be a discussion with the selectmen. The next step in the process would indeed be whoever we select to have those conversations that you mentioned, POCD being one of the most important of them. This is something that has to happen in tandem with that process, and it will be taking place in tandem with that process. We're not at a point, I don't believe, we're at a point where we're going to evaluate solutions for the country club. What we're looking to do is evaluate the partner we want to work with to determine what solutions we want at the country club. If you look at the proposals, you'll see that in a number of cases, they mention market analysis, they mention environmentals, they mention, one didn't mention POCD, but those are elements that they've included in terms of what they would provide. So I think that's one of the reasons, that's one of the evaluating criteria from my perspective, and when I look at it, if they included that, those are the people who I want to do business with. I want to look at folks who were objective, who had, when you look at their resume, they did a lot of different types of things. So all of that, in my mind, fits into how do I evaluate each of these individual proposals. So in answer to your question, yes to almost all of it. It's within our control, and our next steps, we can dictate it.
I
Andrea?
want to ask the question, how can these consultants be objective when in the RFP, it misrepresents, I would say, the findings from that 2014 Malone and McBroom study, saying that consultants Malone and McBroom suggested the highest and best use of the property was housing. This RFP had the bias towards housing in the consultant's consideration. And so I find it hard to feel confident and comfortable considering any of these proposals with that underlying notion that this RFP had inherent biases and directed even less obviously the respondents.
Having read the RFP, I'm not sure I understand where you're saying there was a bias toward housing. It's mentioned, but so is virtually every other
Well, when
option that
you
there could
put out
be.
an RFP saying, provide us with a fair and unbiased analysis,
Yes,
and then say that the highest and best use of the property was reported to be housing.
was that the report?
I'm sorry?
That's what they reported.
Okay, so this is misquoted.
I looked through both, excuse me, Fred.
No, you're fine.
I looked through both the preliminary report and the final report
You're talking
from
about
Malone and McBroom.
Dave, can you speak
And
into the mic?
I read them a couple times. Now, maybe I just missed it, but I never saw any use of the word highest and best in either of those reports. It just didn't exist. So maybe it came from when they talked to people at the board. I don't know that, but it was certainly not in the report. So I wasn't going down the path that Andrea's going down. I was just wanting to know how that came into the RFP, because I didn't see it in the report. That was my question.
The report did mention age-restricted, high-end housing would be best for the development, if development were to occur. It also mentioned that unrestricted housing would cost more than it would bring in, and it would be a net financial loss. Affordable housing was not contemplated by this group.
Was mentioned, I agree. When it says age-restricted housing would be could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Age-restricted, high-end age-restricted housing would be the best for, if development were considered.
That's
Relative
housing
to
is the
unrestricted
best.
housing, relative to unrestricted. But that doesn't mean that's the best use of
Totally
the
agree.
property.
Totally agree.
And I
However, it
feel
does.
the way it was quoted in the RFP in the history section just misrepresents that finding. Now, does that quote and reference, is that the only way that I feel like this RFP had a kind of a bias towards that? No. But I think that was the most stand out obvious one. I do want to echo the point made in public comment that it framed I would imagine it would frame the consultant's perspective in chopping up the property. That's based on the quote that was reiterated to us.
Okay? My viewpoint
Yes, please, of course.
is, and maybe it's because I am as hard as possible trying to make sure I remain objective. It's a consultant. What the RFP would made clear is that we're looking for unbiased input. We don't have a preconceived notion as to what we want to do. So when I reviewed these proposals, I was reviewing them in the context of, okay, who's giving us the broadest range of opportunity and options for this, who kind of followed what the RFP was looking for. So what I ask is that we all at least try to regard it from an objective standpoint. These are consultants. I mean, something said in the public comment was we should not go with these consultants, but rather we should hire consultants for specific elements of what we want to do there. In my mind, that chops up the property. A single vision is a vision that is more holistic and takes into consideration multiple options. So I view it as which one of these folks, which one of these consultants is in a position to provide us with the broadest opportunities and the unbiased options that there are. So, and I think it's important that we each maintain a level of objectivity in terms of looking at it from that perspective. If you're looking not to do housing, then any mention of housing is going to be a problem. You know what I mean? If
Understood.
you're looking not to do commercial, any mention of commercial is going to be a problem. So from that perspective, my sense is I'm not looking for the what, I'm looking for the how. How are you, and if you look at these proposals, some of them were detailed in terms of market analysis, in terms of discovery, in terms of vision, in terms of different elements of how they would go about it. Those are the ones that impressed me. Those are the ones that I say, okay, we can work with these people. Because now all we got to do is fine tune it and see exactly what it'll entail. But that's what I came up with.
And did you feel their cited examples were diverse in representation of?
Some of them more than others, no
Yeah.
doubt about it. There's some that had very thorough and detailed proposals and demonstrated, and what was demonstrated in their material was more housing, was more very, very specific. And candidly, that's why I rated them the way that I did. That went into the way that I personally rated them, so. Yeah, there's a little hornet I'm looking to see. I'm hoping it comes near here, we'll get it. So, other thoughts? Is there anyone that, is there any proposal that the group felt or others felt was superior and or better, or touched on something, you know, or that we felt we should not consider?
Before we get into that, may I just ask your vision, and it came up in public comment, but regardless, I felt it worth addressing or exploring how this does fit in to our bigger town planning effort and initiative. And, you know, I heard someone say, what's coming first, the cart or the horse? And so if you can just speak to that, Mika, your vision for that, I think that can help.
I think hiring a consultant to help us determine what we can do on the country club will put us in a position to better input into the POCD what we should do with the country club.
Have you considered the current POCD's recommendations? Like the one that is soon expiring in terms of this property?
In terms of consideration, I've read it, I understand what it is, but I also feel like in order to move forward, there was another comment made, before I completely respond to that, there was another comment made that we're going down the same path. That I completely disagree with. Candidly, if we don't consider a consultant, I don't remember another time, and maybe this is just me not remembering, I don't remember another time that we hired a consultant to give us we worked with developers. We worked with developers on very specific solutions, but I don't remember having gone into a situation where you were looking to hire a consultant to assist us in terms of how to go about doing something with the country club, which is one of the reasons I feel strongly that we should hire a consultant, because I don't want to do the same thing and come up with the same result. So an area where I feel very strongly is that we do need to do something different, and hiring a consultant would be something very different. We haven't done that.
So I think one of the reasons I read through the Malone and McBroom's with a fine-tooth comb a little bit was because they were involved in the POCD, correct? At the same time. So that's the closest thing we've had to
Correct.
that. And it is 10 years old. So and it was a golf course at that time. So
Correct.
the whole thing has changed 100%. But they did have a different take on the financial metrics, and on the appendices in their report were very different than what we got from every developer that came to the board with pie in the sky about how much money you're going to make. And I thought that was indicative of the difference between somebody who comes in looking for reality versus somebody who's coming in to make a profit on buying the property and on selling it for single-family homes, which are some of the failed opportunities that we had. And I must say, I just kind of, as I read through, there were pieces of each of the projects that made sense to me, that I liked about what they were offering.
The RFP proposals or the projects?
On the proposals, as I looked through the
RFPs.
proposals, the responses to the RFP.
Yes.
But I didn't really, maybe I didn't come to the same conclusion of ranking them all in order. There were a couple that I thought didn't answer the actual questions of the RFP that were sort of, not favorable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to be hard I have a bias about it, and I'm sure everybody else here does too. So the one thing that bothers me the most about it is I keep thinking, when I'm 50 years from now, we're not going to be able to find 150 acres anywhere within, I don't know how many 100,000 square miles of here that we could buy for anything. And we've got other towns around us that are paying lots of money for way smaller pieces of property just to have open space. So we're in kind of a unique situation with it. And I think that, I think we've maybe just been pushed by mill rates and other people's agendas to want to do something when I think it's going to be hard for us to really see through that and look ahead of what are people going to say about this 50 years from now when.
I appreciate your candor in that, David, and I understand and I agree with you, and I don't think that it's necessary for us to have no bias in order to determine what the best course of action is to go forward. What I'll introduce is you also, when you think about 50 years from now and you think about that property, please also think about where we are with the mill rate and with our taxes. Not to say that influences it, but we have to consider both. That's what we're here to do.
Sure.
We have to balance things from that perspective. So I don't want you folks to think you're because you're biased, we can't have this discussion, we can't come
Well,
to a
we were
conclusion.
elected on this issue largely. And so people voted for us because of our perspectives surrounding, in part, this property. And so in that way, our biases, though I absolutely understand the need for objectivity, especially when reviewing proposals, but our duty is to the taxpayers,
Correct.
not to the consultants, and not to the people who put forth these proposals. And yes, and it's both.
But consider what you just said. I feel I was very specifically elected because I said we would take action on the country club.
Yes.
And that's
we
why
are.
I'm
I
here,
mean,
and I
we
think that's
are.
why I'm here. So that's why I feel compelled and an obligation to make sure that we address this. We address this prudently. We address this with sensitivity to what everyone needs, and we make some really smart decisions as to what we want to do.
Absolutely.
So-
And I appreciate your motivation to act. And we can't risk, you know, land use planning is a big deal.
It really
And
is.
you only get one shot. I mean, here we are 14 years later, still having the same different versions of the same conversation, but it can't be rushed. And I'm not saying this is what you're advising, but to satisfy this itch that we're dying to, scratch.
I understand, and I appreciate that. It's, but that's not where we are. I'm looking at this more from a very practical standpoint, in the sense of we had a RFP that we put out. We had responses to
Well,
those
that the
RFPs.
previous board put out.
That the previous board, but the town pulled out. Now we're put out. And we have these responses, and respondents, Tony's been good about checking with them to see if they're, letting them know what's going on. They seem to be still interested in hearing what we have to say about this. After looking at the responses, as you said, David, there were some that weren't as strong as others. But when you look at the ones that were strong, they're land use consultants. They're people. There's one in particular they gave very specific examples of what they did with golf courses. Of course, in one instance, they kept the golf course, and that's a little different than where we are, but nonetheless, so they're folks who, I believe, and when I say objective, it's not, saying I don't care about anything, it's more, these folks seem like they know what they're doing, and we could use some help. We have not been successful doing anything with this property for the last 7 years. And what we've done is had developers. And as you said, David, very, very, concisely, and I think this is a great point, is we had proposals from people who stood to make a profit. We're paying these consultants. They're paid to be neutral. They're paid to offer us objective opinions. So from that perspective, it's much different. They don't have a dog in the race, so to speak, in the sense of your final solution. They're going to come up with that based on what we do. And contrary to what was said in public comment, I do believe this board. I give this board a lot more credit than to think we're just going to let them do what they want and we're just going to go along and just nod our head and say yes. I don't believe that for a second. I truly believe we will be very responsible. We will be very sensitive to what the people are asking for, because we're going to make sure that happens. Because we all feel the way we do about different things, different elements. So that's where I am.
In the spirit of that, and to piggyback off of Andrea and David, I was going to mention that this will be getting the financial information from the consultant. It's going to have a far different feel to it than getting individual financials from anyone who's proposing a project to us and who just wants to buy it from us to do whatever it is that they want to do. And so in that vein, I feel as though, although I agree that the RFP could have been worded more inclusively for all of the options that were out there, I think that we have the opportunity to help guide what they're looking at now and help to get some answers and get some engagement as we further the POCD that we need to work on as well. But I think that this will be the first part of it, and a lot of them split up their proposal into phases. And so sometimes there's a little gray area insofar as what some people included in phase 1 versus phase 2. And so I think that, my initial comments about making sure all the financials were in phase 1 before we got to phase 2, because there were a couple of them that sort of said you could opt for this here in phase 1, or we can do it with the planning. I would opt to do that earlier rather than later, so that, as I think one of the commenters mentioned today, it could be our decisions and what we move forward with can be guided by some data and can be guided by what is best for the town. Because we have an enormous opportunity here to increase our quality of life. And we may or may not, depending on what the consultants find, have an opportunity to, for some economic growth. May or may not. And we certainly have an opportunity to increase our quality of life and to balance those in some respects. So in order for me to be able to make a decision on that balance, I would need this information. I would need some of this information that the consultants have laid out insofar as what is the environmental impact, what is going to be the cost versus the revenue for the town for any of these options in order to make a decision about moving forward. And that's where I think the value in some of these proposals lies, is in the depth and the other consultants that they were bringing on board and their ability to answer some of these questions for us.
To correct the record, or just to clarify the record, I have spoken to a number of people and said I see a three-pronged approach to this, a portion developed, a portion open space, and a portion restricted open space. So in any of those scenarios, in all the scenarios that I see, there's a majority of the property that would remain open space, would remain what we want conserved. So additionally, what I'll also offer is that from my perspective, the two things that I don't see is full development and absolutely do nothing. Those are the two things that I just don't see as viable options. Aside from that, what we do there, I think comes with, as Maria indicated, after we have collected data from people who are expert at doing that, specialists at doing that, whatever you want to say. And working with them in a way that's productive, with the intent of making sure that we get what will indeed, because there's one thing I very much agree with somebody who said it out there, will indeed make this a gem, will indeed make this an attraction, will indeed make this something that people around the property feel very, very good about.
I think it is. And not to say it hasn't reached its full potential. So I agree that there's greater potential.
I feel like, oh, I'm sorry, Andrea, excuse me.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I do want to go back to my previous question that I don't think was really addressed about the conservation plan of development, this master plan,